Well, we're back. Coalition Purple.
Yep.
Politics without a plan. Maybe that should be our
Yeah,
maybe that should
that's
be our
right.
motto.
If it's not our motto, it's our way of life. So,
Yeah, right.
so there we go.
It's always a surprise, We log in, it's like, okay, let's see what happens. So well, I've started out the last couple. I think I'm gonna let you kind of roll with it. What's going on in your world?
Well, it's interesting because I've been kind of thinking more about me personally as far as what's been going on in my world and sort of some of the things that have been affecting me and ongoing, but I think are also reflective largely of things that are going on in California. And, obviously there's been a lot of upheaval recently in the federal elections. Everyone's talking about that because, we just had one. But, the states, are going to be facing a lot of challenges too. And I know for me personally, there's a few things that are coming down the pike that are very troubling and I think probably trouble a lot of other people. And the main one that's been on my mind lately is insurance.
Oh,
Um, I know for me personally, I'm about to lose the fire insurance on my house for
really?
nothing that I did.
No.
But the state is requiring, because I recently talked to my insurance agent about this. So the state is requiring the insurance agencies to pay into a pool, and then that pool will be used by the state. And I can't remember what the state fire protection plan is, but it'll be used for the state fire protection plan. But basically, what it comes down to is the insurance companies don't want to be paying for people's fire damage while simultaneously having to pay additional money into the state fire pool. So my insurer, which is Farmers,
Mhm.
is just basically starting to shunt people into the state uh, system because they don't want to get double
Yeah.
billed. And
Right.
so they're just not offering fire insurance anymore. I mean, there's a few policies that got renewed by some people, but I'm in like this like they have different fire danger zones, and so I
Right.
guess I'm sort of on the borderline of like one of the fire danger areas, and so they're just not going to offer. They're not going to offer that kind of fire insurance anymore. So I'm able to renew my homeowners insurance and have all the other protections that go along with, my normal homeowners insurance. But fire insurance, I'm not going to be able to get it
Wow.
anymore.
Well, it almost sounds like it's kind of going the way of earthquake insurance. I
Right.
mean, basically, earthquake insurance is a state insurance program. Nobody really insures for, as far as private insurers, really insures for earthquakes anymore,
Yeah.
which I kind of get in a way. But obviously, earthquakes can happen anytime here in California for sure. I think they probably pose less danger now compared to fires. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
But I
crazy.
mean, part of the fire insurance thing too is because as I'm a business owner and I own other property that's rental property, I
Yeah.
have to have insurance on that too. And right now, my insurance is still good, so hopefully that will last for that. But I mean, I know for a fact that I've talked to other people who are having similar problems, getting fire insurance, and it's also a bigger issue, not only just in insurance wise, but it's reflective of the fact that we've done such a poor job in this state of dealing with catastrophic fires.
Yeah.
I mean, the insurance wouldn't be such an issue if every fire that rolled down the pike didn't turn out to be some giant catastrophe.
Yeah.
And so while we focus on a lot on federal politics, which is in a lot of respects a focus of the show, and I think an interesting thing to talk about for the most part. But this is an issue that's just 100% California, and if
Mhm.
California in the years to come can't get its act together as far as its policies towards fire prevention, then I mean literally the entire state is going to be in this state funded pool.
Yeah.
All the insurers are going to pull out, and we're already a state that has a lot of debt and has difficulty providing services for people. And I know people that had lost their homes in other fires and were already part of the state fire insurance. It took years years and years
Right.
for them to rebuild their homes because they were stuck in this state fire bureaucracy. But when the state fire bureaucracy is the only thing that's available to people,
What do you
what's
do?
going to happen? You're going to find whole communities of people homeless for years
Yeah.
and unable to rebuild because they were unable to buy fire insurance in California. And that's going to be an absolute catastrophe.
Right. Yeah, I know, and that is fairly unique to California. I think Washington and Oregon are kind of going through similar things, not quite as bad as California. But then you look at like Florida. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get insurance in Florida today, not because of fires, but because of hurricanes and
Hurricanes.
flooding. I mean, people are starting, oddly enough, are moving out of Florida because they just literally cannot get insurance.
Right.
And so, part of it is this whole climate change thing. If you believe it or not, in my mind, it doesn't really matter. Because the odds are, there has been an increase in all kinds of catastrophes, and now they may go back down. Maybe, who knows? If maybe climate change is not real. I don't know, but I think personally it is. There's something going on, whether we caused it or just Earth's normal natural, things that it goes through is causing it. Really doesn't matter. Um, but at the same time, again, it comes down to priorities. This stuff is happening, and
Yeah.
so how do we convince, whether it's a state government or federal government, to start refocusing on these kinds of things? It's kind of the challenge of the future, that we're meeting financially,
Yeah. But I mean,
besides Medicare and Social Security.
yeah. Well, I was going to say too, there's a whole, it sort of rolls into a whole bunch of other things. Like one of the things that happens out here in California is when the wind starts to blow, they turn everybody's power off.
Right.
And, again, that's indicative of a larger problem. We can't have power when the wind blows because our infrastructure is so bad. And and as someone who comes from a healthcare background, if you have people that are elderly or in isolated areas, and there's plenty of that in California,
Yep.
and you just turn their power off, well, what if they
Yeah.
are on a respirator? What
Right.
if, they have other medical needs that require them to have power? So it's like we don't do proper things for fire prevention. We don't do proper things to protect our electrical grid. We haven't built a robust enough electrical grid to service all the electrical things that are coming along. And then, when talking about insurance, you can't fail to notice that another thing insurance wise is that my medical insurance is going up by 15-20% this year, again,
Yeah.
year after year.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well, at least I can get insurance, and I actually have good insurance, and I'm grateful for that. But it's like, at what point does medical insurance become as unaffordable as fire insurance has become?
Right.
And so we're facing an insurance crisis. We're facing an infrastructure crisis. We're facing so many different things. And I just don't see anything going on within the state and within the state bureaucracy that says we're looking to solve a lot of these problems. Like, and as I say, I kind of rattling on here a little bit, but like for Medi-Cal, the state-funded insurance for the people
Low
that,
income.
that have limited access, they have low income. It's like that insurance is garbage. I
Oh,
know
it's terrible.
facilities that don't accept it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like we pay a huge amount of money into the Medi-Cal program to insure people in a way that their insurance isn't even accepted at various places.
Hmm.
So it's like, well, what's the point of doing that? And then that brings us into the whole idea of how much we're stressing our emergency medical services. And you sort of look at the number of people that use emergency medical services as sort of a routine way to get health care. And that is the most expensive way conceivable to deal with normal healthcare procedures. And so it's amazing the things that are going on in California that are not getting addressed and we're not making any progress on. And so those are kind of the things that I've been thinking about a little bit just because, those are the things that are hitting me right now.
Sure.
And I'm a person that can actually say, hey, look, I'm, if I'm being honest, I'm, much better off than most people financially. I'm not suffering. I'm not gonna, you
Right.
know, have some kind of aneurysm and freak out about all this sort of stuff because, I have been fortunate. But I mean, if it's affecting me, it's affecting everyone
Oh
down
my
the
gosh.
chain too. I mean, it's like it's crazy. And, as I say, I'm very fortunate to have some sort of financial wherewithal to be able to, survive things like increased health insurance costs. But that's not true for everybody.
No, it's not true from probably at least half the people. I mean, there's so many people that are living paycheck to paycheck,
Yeah.
and when you kind of boil all these things down, I always keep coming back. Follow the money kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's like I think we have at any level, whether you're talking state or federal, just such a lack of imagination on how to solve problems. And this is where again a third party, I think, hopefully can plant its flag that I think all these things are solvable, but we're everything is so enmeshed in the political foundations of how are we going to basically keep our power, not so much
Right.
uh, how are we going to solve these problems. And I was actually listening to a interview the other night with Andrew Yang of all. I hadn't listened to him in a long time, but he was talking about that because and I didn't realize this, but when he was endorsing that other Democrat candidate to try and replace Joe Biden, however long ago that was, 8, 9, 10 months ago, I just wasn't listening to him a whole lot since then. And but he was basically saying, apparently he predicted like 6, 8 months ago, there's no way Democrats are going to win
Hmm.
because of basically a lack of imagination and the fact that Joe Biden didn't drop out when he should have, and there was no primary, and all the reasons, right?
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is, I think that's where a third party could be such a leveler in all of this to start bringing imagination back into solving these problems. Because most of the insurance stuff, when you look at medical stuff, especially, um, it when they did Obamacare or the ACA, everybody hailed it. It was like, it did help some people get insurance that they never could before, right?
Yeah.
But really, it wasn't healthcare reform. It was in sort of insurance reform,
Exactly.
and there was no there. It was still all about the money, and it was like we're starting from the wrong goal.
Yeah.
And the goal needs to be, how do we get the most people to a place where they can feel confident they can get the help when they need it
Right.
and without bankrupting us. I
Right.
mean, that
Yeah.
has to be the goal, but that's never the goal.
Yeah.
It's like, can we do just enough to make sure we don't piss off our supporters in the insurance world, or how do we do just enough that we don't, upset whatever the medical profession or whatever. It's like, guys, somebody's got to think, fight our way out of this paper bag that we put ourselves in.
Yeah. The ACA or Obamacare is one of the great examples of overreach that just lands you in stupidville. It had three things in it that were really, really good. And it was you couldn't be denied insurance for a pre-existing condition.
Right?
Insurers had to pay out something like 80% of the amount that they took in premiums.
Yep.
And the last thing was they banned the type of insurance that had care limits, because part of the reasons that people would lose their insurance is, your policy, you get sold a bill of goods that you're getting good insurance, and then the insurance would pay out the amount of money that it was allowed to pay out, and then you wouldn't have any insurance. But at the exact time that you were losing insurance, of course, is that now you have a pre-existing condition, right? Because that's what you were using the insurance for, and so you couldn't get new insurance. So your insurance ran out, and now you're uninsurable. So those three things would have been really good legislation to pass. But you could have written a 3-page bill that said those three things, and that's it. But the ACA is thousands and thousands of pages
Yeah.
that sets up essentially a healthcare subsidy and a bunch of taxes to try and pay for it. And so while the ACA did those three things that were good, what it really did was it just raised the cost of everything for everyone. And so instead of bringing down the cost of healthcare, it increased the cost of healthcare. And then all that you were able to do is buy insurance on the exchange, which a lot of private care facilities decided that they just weren't going to take anyway. And so again, it's like it's nice, it's like good advertising, and it had a few good things in it,
Mhm.
but it needed to be edited properly, and it turned into just a big money hole. And now the ACA is one of the biggest costs. It's the third largest entitlement program and the fourth or fifth largest single expense for the
Yeah,
government
something
now,
like
or
that.
something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Because you got well, debt's probably number what 3 or 4, and you got
Well, I think
Medicare.
debt actually might be number one.
It might, well, it's getting close to being number one, just the way it's
Yeah.
growing, right? So yeah, no, exactly. And no, I mean, again, I think maybe it was one of those things where the intention maybe was a good one because of those 3 issues that you discussed, but that
Hmm.
were good. But then you just start going into all these other things, creating new marketplaces when, well, we actually do have a marketplace already,
Yeah.
you know, and it just sort of, we're really good at complicating things as humans. And that was an example of it. And I think it was, again, it was a reaction to so many people going through those terrible situations.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, let's go with this. We got momentum, so we're going to do all these other things. And it was like, no, you know,
Yeah, and that's the problem, though. But again, going back to California and the plight that we Californians find ourselves in, if we don't start to address some of the basics,
yeah,
we're just part of it too that because it's been sort of like all these things sort of running together in my head. Part of what you've been seeing now is the sanctuary states and the sanctuary cities and the governors getting together saying that they're going to resist Trump's federal deportation and all these other things.
right,
But one source of cost in California is illegal immigration. Again, you think about the number of people, that's more risk. It's more stress on the electrical grid. It's more stress on the emergency rooms and the medical system. It's more stress on the schools. It's just a numbers game. It doesn't have anything to do with who they are or where they came from or anything else. It's just numbers.
yep,
And so if you're unwilling to even sort of acknowledge the fact that we have a numbers problem, well, how are you going to solve these things? We're fighting fights, that we shouldn't be fighting instead of trying to get things done that we need to do. And it's just like, it's kind of like a circular firing squad thing. It's just terrible. Everyone's all this infighting and nothing gets done. And again, to go back to the idea of the third parties, because that's, kind of one of the things that we always talk about, of course, is, if we there needs to be somebody that can bring some clarity and say, hey, we need to fix our electrical grid. We need to get over some of these fights and just do some sensible things so that we can concentrate on fixing the electrical grid so that we don't have as many fires, so that we
yeah,
can charge all the electrical cars that we're going to be mandated to have to buy. It's like we got to get on with some of this stuff and we just don't seem to be doing it.
yeah. Well, again, because it's the motivation and the goals don't align with what we actually need to do.
Right.
The goals are aligned with how to stay in power. And that was the one thing, again, going back to the Andrew Yang thing that I was listening to the other night. That was basically his thing when he said, I can see what's going to happen. Because people have just become exhausted by this whole thing. I think it is finally coming home that both of these parties are in it for themselves. They're
Hmm.
not in it to solve a problem, and whatever that problem is. And so I guess on the bright note, we're starting to see more and more people. Like we were talking the other night when we happened to see each other. Hey, Denzel Washington said, "Don't listen to either one of these parties," and he's not a political guy, for all intents and purposes, from what I can tell. But he's basically saying they're just lying to you. I mean, that was basically his comment, and we need more people to kind of say that. The other bright spot I thought was just a blast. We talked a little bit about this too. Was that the Onion's going to buy the Infowars? I mean, I think these are all symptoms of how frustrated people are, and and in an odd way, hopefully it kind of moves the ball forward that, you know, you get crazy people that, ran InfoWars that sent out all this, just really blatantly false information. And now the Onion, whose job is to be blatantly
False.
false, owns it. And I mean, what beautiful irony can that be? It couldn't be any better, right?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. As I say, I've loved The Onion for years. I love their comedy. I love the satire. And so hopefully
Yep.
we'll get more of that now. Having Infowars be this faux
Perfect.
conspiracy
Perfect.
site,
Perfect.
I know it'll be good.
But it really is. It's just it's just a mind-boggling. I mean, you can look at all these, and I know all these issues are very complicated. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like immigration, people know what needs to happen. You do have to have a secure border, no question.
yep,
But for those who are legitimate, and for those who are here at this point, we got to figure out a sensible way to deal with it, and they know how to deal with it. They need to get more people involved to just literally just go through all of it. I mean, there's just so much of it just to clear out crap.
yep,
And but we're fighting over we're just fighting over, these people coming over the border are evil versus no, they're not evil, but and we need to find a home for them and all that. It's like these these are not the issues. Like you said, it's a numbers game. We got to worry about the numbers and figure out the sensible way to process all this just to clear up the mess we're in right now,
yeah,
while hopefully stopping the mess from continuing so we don't keep getting a bigger mess. I mean,
yeah,
every one of these problems that you brought up, insurance, the whole fire maintenance thing, all these things, the debt, all these things can be solved
yeah.
if people
If you
just
actually
take
try and solve them, but we're not
yeah,
even trying at this point.
no,
It's
no, we're not.
crazy.
And that comes back. And again, that's where I look at it as well, we can blame all these people that we've elected.
Hmm.
But then when you boil that all down, then we're all the ones who are at fault. When I say we, the voters.
Yeah.
It's like, and so how do we, is our responsibility to fix it. And the only way you're going to do it is you got to have more choices.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get the choices out of these two that we have right now.
Yeah, yeah, because as I say, one of the things, and this goes back to sort of like the national level of politics and federal, but obviously it trickles down into the states, and that is, what is going to become of these two parties? I mean, there's already so much talk about how they're going to be realigned or who's going to be in charge and what the next candidates are going to be, and everybody talking about these things. And I think I mentioned, I can't remember if I maybe mentioned it on the last podcast or maybe the last time that we saw each other. But the idea of Trump's got all these appointments in the queue, waiting to see who can get approved and not get approved. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I mean, if he gets every one of his appointments approved, then you look at that and you say, okay, well the Republican Party is fairly united. They're all on board with the Trump
Yeah.
agenda and they're going to put his people in place. But I would bet you that he doesn't get a lot of these people in.
Well, Gates went down today. He
Oh, he
dropped
went.
out.
Gates dropped out. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's one down already.
Yeah.
And it's not because of pressure from the Democrats. It's because of pressure from inside the Republicans and the idea that the Senate will not be able to approve,
Right.
get themselves together enough to approve Trump's nominees. And that's all internal with
Right.
the Republicans. So to me, it looks like the Republican Party is really two parties. And if that's already happening, it just has to become official somehow, right? Where it's
Right.
like they declare, there's the Never Trump Party and then there's the Trump Party. The Trump Party is called the Republicans, maybe, but
Whatever.
then
Yeah.
the Never Trump Party is called what?
Yeah.
We could just call them the Conservative Party
Yeah.
or the Anti-Abortion Party or whatever they want to call themselves.
Right. Well, probably, I don't know, 8, 10 months ago, right? Maybe a year ago, I kept thinking, this election's going to be a great reckoning for Republicans because they seem so split and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And then after the election, it kind of dawned, kind of became the realization, well, maybe the Democrats are going to be the ones that get, change quicker than the Republicans. But then, like you said, with all these appointments and things that I think are going to be kind of a really rough road to hoe with Trump. Hopefully, both of them go through a reckoning
Yeah.
at the same time because they're both a disaster in
Right.
their own unique ways. And hopefully, enough people realize that and start thinking again, let's use some imagination here and figure out ways people in the middle could kind of come together and create something new and better that actually focuses on the issues, not power.
Yeah. And I think honestly, and I've said this for quite a few years now, and I've probably said it on the podcast a few times. I think California is the perfect place to
Yeah,
start something like this because we are a true one party state.
yeah,
There needs to be something. I mean, you could say that okay, the Republicans could reform themselves and gain enough sway that they could actually be relevant in California again. But the Republicans are so hated in this state and so demonized and just so
yeah.
seemingly beyond any repair that I don't see that coming back. So unless we're going to have a one party state forever, which is a disaster.
Yeah, it's the only thing worse than a two-party state.
Yeah. But yeah, but I mean something has to come along. I mean, and I
Right.
just can't believe that California is going to be stuck in this one party quagmire, indefinitely. But the question is, how does it evolve? What comes along? Because if you could create a party in California that had some influence in California politics, well, California's a huge state, right? So you
Oh,
could
yeah.
export that party, around the rest of the country pretty easily. And on that note, I haven't heard back from the Reform Party. Just putting it out there.
Well, that was the interesting thing that Andrew Yang was saying the other night. Apparently, Forward is, however they measure these things, I don't know, the largest third party now that
Hmm.
they have. And I don't know if that's based on financial resources or membership or whatever, but he expressly said, we're larger than libertarians and the Greens now. So, but you know, what the metric is, I couldn't tell you that because they have lots of funny ways of measuring these things.
Yeah.
Um, but clearly they've got a little bit of momentum going. So, but to your point, yeah, I think California um, uh, has always prided itself to being at one time. I don't think it's very true these days, but for a long time it was kind of the whole saying, however California goes, so goes the nation.
Yeah.
You know, that hasn't really happened a whole lot lately.
Hmm.
But, hey, maybe that's the rallying cry. Let's get back to the point where we're, trying to come up with some innovation and some better ways of doing things that are reasonable and sensible,
Yeah.
that are not just shiny objects that, boy, this sounds cool and progressive or whatever. But because we got some major, major hurdles we've got to get over.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the whole shiny object problem, I think, is definitely going to be something on the agenda for us to talk about for, the year to come. Because we do in California, we chase after shiny objects.
Oh, yeah.
Like one of the things that you brought up was today was global warming. And I'm not a global warming denier by any means. I mean, I can look at a graph. I can,
Yeah.
see the
It
chart
seems
go up.
something's definitely going on.
But the thing is, I've always felt like that's completely the wrong focus if you actually want to get something done. It's too big, it's too vast, it's too controversial. And it's like, as soon as you start talking about global anything,
Yeah.
well, I mean, the United States is not the largest polluter anymore. China is.
Right.
So when we talk about, well, we have to stop global warming, okay, well, then you're what, going to go to China? Because, I mean, that's what you have to do if you're going to stop global anything.
Yeah.
And I always felt like there was a period of time when I was a kid, like in the 70s and 80s, where people really talked a lot about pollution and not littering and having a clean environment, doing
Yep.
something locally in your space. And I always felt like that was a way, way better way to look at things. Look, if you want to talk about lowering uh, global emissions or whatever, like growing up in Los Angeles, we always talked about the smog and how terrible the smog was,
Yep,
and how the
absolutely.
Olympics in the what was it, '84 Olympics, was, it was a big joke about how everyone was going to have to run through the smog. But the smog problem started to get better. But I think a lot of the reason it started to get better is because people in that area that were directly facing a tangible problem, the smog, did things to deal with that. And I don't there wasn't a lot of backlash or complaint because everybody could look out the
No,
window and be like, geez, we need to get rid of this smog or we're all going to die.
yeah,
And so I think when you can deal with more local things as opposed to making it a global problem, which is too vast for anyone to
yeah,
comprehend, each one of those little local things, one of those small things, could make such a big difference cumulatively that, I mean, you could really start making inroads on the problem. But as long as you're just having this endless chase of shiny object of we're going to save the planet, it's too big for anyone to get behind
yeah.
and understand. And so it's like that's so many things. It's, in California, we always do that. Well, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to, save the planet. It's like, no, try and just make
Let's
California
just,
work better. I mean, come on.
yeah, let's just start with LA. I,
Yeah, seriously.
right. I mean, and a perfect point on that too is like the homeless thing. It's like
Mhm.
it is so gargantuan just here in the States. It's not as big of a problem elsewhere for lots of different reasons, or they don't care about homeless, one of the two.
Mm.
There's countries where, hey, homeless is kind of normal.
Yeah,
Um, but homeless, it's like, and where the solutions have been coming from, as limited as they've been, have been at literally the local level. I mean, the
yeah,
little in the neighborhood, in the little town, the little where they've done those things, and it's because, to your point, people can relate to it. It's tangible. It's simple. It makes sense. I get it. It impacts me directly. Um, and that's the way we need to deal with it. And it's actually a sense of pride. I mean,
yeah,
I remember when California was going through the whole smog thing. I wasn't even living then, but we came over all the time from Arizona, and I just always got the sense that there was actually pride in being able to get this fixed,
yeah,
and they did get it fixed because it had to be. And we've lost a lot of that. Just, I don't know, it's somebody else's problem. And again, keeps coming back to us, the voters, and
yeah,
the reason why people just need to get more engaged, which is kind of the watchword for everything we talk about, seems like these days.
yeah. Well, as I say, I think there's a lot of interesting potential coming down the pike. We'll
Yeah,
see if that potential leads to anything. But I think that the way information is exchanged, the opportunities to get information in different ways, um, once that starts happening more and more, the more ideas that come out, the more people can be a little bit more connected to each other. Um, not demonizing each other.
right.
One thing that I really hope will be is that, after this election is finally done, some of this crazy demonic rhetoric will start to go away, and we'll begin to talk again about, like, what could we do to solve some of these problems? We know we have problems, so what can we do to sort of solve them?
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. The nobody has a monopoly on a good idea. I mean, they come from all
Absolutely.
sorts, and you know, hopefully people have gotten exhausted enough that they're starting to listen. I hope so. But
Yeah.
anyways, all right. Well, we better wrap it up for this week, and see what happens here over the next couple of weeks. Things are going to be really interesting. I think the Matt Gates thing that just happened is going to be kind of an interesting little snowball going down a really steep hill
Yeah,
for
it'll
the
be
next
interesting to see
couple
what happens.
months
Oh, and
of
I'll
all
just
the
throw
stuff
in
they
here
do.
that I guess because next Thursday, and we usually record on Thursdays for anyone listening
Yeah,
to this,
right,
is going
right.
to be Thanksgiving. So we'll be off for a week, but I want to wish you
Yep.
happy Thanksgiving and
Yeah,
enjoy the
you too.
holidays. And, my best to all yours.
Same here. Talk to you in a bit.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.